Hello and welcome. Having just looked at 15 games and benchmarks across Full HD and QHD resolutions on this Dell G15 5530 with the RTX 4050, we'll now talk about the acoustic performance, that is, how loud does this laptop get under load. We'll talk about surface temperatures with your hands on the keyboard, and of course we'll talk about the thermals on the CPU and the GPU inside this laptop. Does it have the cooling capacity to keep everything under check, and how much power is being pushed? To see that, please stay tuned until the thermal section. As a bonus, we've also included some power levels here so you can see what is the power levels to this 4050 in the Dell G15 5530 during gaming. So before we jump in though, please click that subscribe button and hit that notification bell so that you're the first to know when there's new content available here. Let's dive right in. The software used to administer your Dell G15 5530 is also known as the Alienware Command Center. This is also the same software that's used for the Alienware series of laptops such as the Alienware X16R1 and the M18R1. Once you launch this software, you'll have a few different modes here to choose from. To begin with, we'll start with the battery mode, then we have a quiet mode, followed by a balance mode, a performance mode, and of course a custom mode is available here. The 5 different modes allow you to use different profiles which are pre-optimized by Dell via the Alienware Command Center that allow you to toggle a specific workload. For example, if you're gaming, most of the time you should be operating in performance mode. Dell G15 5530 with the Alienware Command Center does offer a custom mode. With the custom mode enabled, if you go over to the advanced view for the CPU, you're able to adjust such things as the full boost speed of the CPU, as well as toggle the voltage for the CPU. In effect, this is similar to an undervolt, but you're basically limiting the CPU. Once you've done that, you can click test and save, and what this will do is run through a battery test for the CPU to ensure that your settings are stable. This will give you at least a first run to make sure that the settings you've selected are not going to crash your laptop, at least while in operation. This, however, keep in mind, will not guarantee that your games are stable during gameplay and other advanced usage scenarios. So be sure to test during some gaming sessions also to ensure that you do have these settings properly dialed in. If there's a problem, you can of course return here and start to adjust those settings until you get a stable operation. In addition, there is also a custom mode availability where you can manage the thermal profiles, or rather the fan speeds or the fan curves here. Once you've gone into the advanced view and adjusted the CPU frequency and also the CPU voltage, you can also go over to the overview tab, and at the bottom you'll see a toggle for performance and thermal. If you toggle over to thermal, you'll have 2 advanced views, one for the CPU fan and one for the GPU fan. Keep in mind here that for the CPU fan, you're also able to toggle a TCC feature, which generally limits the overall maximum CPU temperatures that you can have in operation. This will essentially act similar to an undervolt, and you can use this also to control and constrain that Intel 13th generation CPU to reduce the amount of heat that's being generated. We begin here with a look at thermal's performance in the balance mode, and if we look at also here, we can see the power levels with our overlay. We're getting about 90 to 93, perhaps 94 watts on that GPU. So that is well within the spec for what we've seen with the 4050 on other laptops this year as well. As we can see here that with these thermals, we're sitting at about 70 degrees on both the CPU and the GPU. The CPU being slightly over that mark, but closer to 80 degrees at certain points, with the GPU staying nice and cool right at 60 degrees. As we jump into the balance mode, or excuse me, the performance mode, we see here that there is slight difference in terms of the CPU performance. We're getting closer to about 80 degrees on that CPU now, much more consistently than we were in the balance mode. However, the GPU still staying nice and cool right at around the 70 degrees mark, with about 93 to 94 watts still being pushed to that GPU, the RTX 4050 in this Dell G15. And finally, if we look at the custom mode performance here we've got everything dialed all the way up. We've turned down the CPU frequency to 4500 megahertz as maximum, and we've also limited the voltage to as low as the ACC will allow us. In addition, we've turned the fans to max fans on both the CPU and the GPU, and TCC limited that CPU as well. With these options, we're now seeing about 68 degrees, 69 degrees roughly on the GPU, so no change there, and about 72 degrees on the CPU as well, with about 95 watts to the GPU. Starting with a look at the acoustics here on the Dell G15, if we begin with the quiet mode here, we see that it's nice and quiet, although not as quiet as to be inaudible at room level. We're seeing here about 43 to 44 decibels on this laptop while running in quiet mode, and that means we've got the fans spinning. They are audible, but if you have the volume turned up on the speakers, you're not going to be hearing them too much. Here the volume has been muted, everything is running at QHD resolution, and we're running this at the maximum settings with ray tracing turned on. So that said, if we move into the balance mode, we see about 46 to 47 decibels now. So there is a slight climb in terms of the audible noise from this laptop, but I would say within reason, 46 to 47 decibels is about average and what you'd see from other similarly equipped gaming laptops. Considering that this is only a 15.6-inch chassis, we don't have that extra capacity here to move that air quickly and across larger surfaces for a better effect with the cooling system. That said, 47 decibels is roughly acceptable for the balance mode. As we jump here in the performance mode, we start to see now that the figures start to creep up to about 48 decibels roughly. We do see flickers here about above 48 decibels, but for the most part, you'll see about 48 decibels of noise. It is slightly noticeable if you have a tuned ear in terms of the difference between balanced or performance mode. If you're looking for gaming, you should be gaming in either of these two modes to get the best balance out of this particular laptop. As we move here from that into the custom mode, this is with the custom fans turned all the way up. We've got 100% CPU fan and 100% GPU fan with the CPU undervolt applied, TCC clamped to 85 degrees centigrade or Celsius on the CPU, as well as the CPU limited to 4500 megahertz as a max turbo boost speed. We've got about 52 decibels running and in custom mode with these custom settings applied with QHD resolution. Not a bad showing, but not something that you'd want to play with at all times either. Alright, as we look at the surface temperatures of this laptop, we'll begin here with running F123 in QHD resolution, that's 2560 by 1440, with everything turned to maximum or ultra settings, with ray tracing enabled and DLSS turned on. So we've got everything engaged here in terms of the RTX 4050 and everything it has to offer in terms of hardware acceleration and whatnot. That said, as we pan across the laptop here, we see that the thermals are pretty much in check. We're looking at well under 40 degrees in terms of most of the keyboard where you'll be touching, particularly around the WASD keys and where you'll be resting your hand. The surface temperatures are quite nice. This is certainly a breath of fresh air in comparison to only 2 or 3 laptop generations ago. If you recall back to the 2050 or the 2060 series laptops, or rather the RTX 2000 series, and also if you're looking back to the 1650 and the 1070, the older generation, surface temperatures were atrocious. You know, we were looking at 50 degrees plus in many laptops on the surface temperatures, particularly where you'd put your WASD keys. So we've gone a long way from those temperatures where it was just simply unplayable for long periods of time, and you'd start to see your fingers being singed. With the exception here at the top strip and of course behind the screen there, which is the design language from Dell lately, you will not be able to find any surface temperatures here that will make things uncomfortable. As we move right along here into the performance mode, you'll notice that there is slight change between the surface temperatures from one mode to another. That said, we do start to see higher temperatures at the top of the laptop. Of course, that's where the heat is, the air is sucked into the laptop before it's pushed over the components and then exhausted out the left, the right side, and the rear of the device. That said, as we pan across the home row or over the number row and the function row, we'll start to see about 40 to 45 degrees in terms of the top temperatures, particularly towards the center of the laptop, because that's where the heat is shared with the heat pipes between the CPU and the GPU before being exhausted out the back. Since the fans are over to the sides of the laptops, that is the hottest point in the laptop because less airflow goes over that area. That said, though, still not going to be an issue since you'll be putting your hands towards the WASD keys or towards the left-hand side of the device, particularly if you're right-handed, and won't have any issues with temperatures exceeding 40 degrees. So for all intents and purposes, there's no difference really between the balance mode and the performance mode in terms of surface temperatures, particularly while you're resting your hand and gaming on this particular laptop and on this particular device. If we look here at the trackpad and also the battery area of this device, nice and cool, well below 30 degrees, so no issues there and nothing really to complain about. And finally, we'll conclude here by looking at the custom mode. So this, again, we're looking at QHD resolution, but this time we've gone into Alienware Command Center, clamped our CPU to 4500 megahertz, Hz as the top boost speed. We've pushed the voltage all the way down as far as ACC will allow us. And we've also tuned the fan speeds here to be max fans on both the CPU and the GPU. So we would think that we'd get a lot less thermal saturation, and thus we'd have cooler surface temperatures, since we're really pushing those fans hard, well above fun noise levels, as you'll see later here in the thermals segment. That said though, as we pan across the laptop, we're seeing pretty much the same story here in the area where you rest your hand, particularly the WAS keys, that home row, and the left hand side of the laptop. Unless you've got fingers dangling over the side of the laptop and feeling that hot exhaust on your hands, you should have no issues with sweaty palms or playing in this particular configuration on this laptop. I've done so for many hours, and I've never felt any discomfort from this laptop, particularly the Dell G15 5530. If you play in a balanced mode, I believe you can get the best of both worlds here, or even perhaps a performance mode, which for the most time stays inaudible unless you're doing something heavy-handed on the laptop, which means you'll get nice and cool and quiet operation. But when you're gaming, it will push those fan speeds up to help get you that performance, and that's one of those modes you can just set it, forget it, and enjoy it. Alright, now to conclude. Having looked at the acoustic performance of this laptop, the surface temperatures, and the thermals, and all of that being well under control, with the acoustics being at most around 52 to 53 decibels in the highest performance mode, or even in around the mid 40s to the high 40s in the balance mode, is fantastic. Surface temperatures well under 40 degrees, particularly at the WASD keys and where you would be resting your hands during gameplay. And of course, we've looked at the thermals as well. Both CPU and GPU were maintained well under 80 degrees in even the most demanding workloads in games. So that said, the RTX 4050 here at 100 watts really delivers. And if you factor in the actual bonus that you get with DLSS 3 plus frame generation support, this is a winner. And in my opinion, this handily beats out the Log series, because this offers what the Log series does not have, at least in the base the base configurations. It comes with 16 gigs of RAM. It also has a 100% DCI-P3, 240 Hz Quad HD display. We'll be talking about a few of the reasons why we believe this is the best buy laptop for everybody in 2023 and even going into early 2024. Watch out for that in a separate video in the future. And if you like this content, please click on the like button, leave a comment below. Let me know what your thoughts on Dell, especially the Dell G series in particular, and what you think value is versus the Log series. I know maybe there'll be a comparison in the near future. And thanks very much for watching. We'll see you in the next video.